Hello everybody, Raspberry Barrel here, and we are reading another biography by Infaminxy on DeviantArt. Before we begin, I want to say thank you all for all the subscribers, it's awesome. And so, let's begin. Please forgive me if I stutter, hesitate, or mispronounce anything, and for any noises in the background. And today, we'll be reading the biography of Universalia, the Despot. The kingdom of Mewni was full of so much glory, yet so many were unaware. This is where Universalia came in and made Mewni a known kingdom name. Universalia the Despot. Universalia butterfly. Was born 114, died 157, was queen 131 through 157. Married to Heron Redbird. Children Scorpius butterfly and Virga butterfly. Universalia was the 11th princess of Mewni and was born on a beautiful night in 114, when the stars shine bright, the moons were full, and the planets could be seen luminously in the sky, giving her the name Universalia. Ever since she was young, Universalia had a determined, passionate, level-headed, bold, excited, and reckless personality. She was also very proud of her royal affiliation and always went to council meetings ever since she was 4. She was definitely one of the more tomboyish or bold queens to attend the throne. Another thing she loved to do as a child was read, more specifically about the history of Mewni. She often visited the Firefly Library, and it soon became a daily routine for Yashia and Universalia to visit the library so Universalia could read about the history of Mewni. Of course, due to being young, she was unable to read the official records, journals, some history books, and some scrolls, so she mostly stuck to the children's books and easy reading level books. During a visit to the Firefly Library one afternoon, she approached a red-haired, blue-eyed girl, reaching for a book that was too high for her to reach. Universalia approached her and asked her if she needed assistance. The girl nodded her head. Universalia then started to climb the shelf to get the book, to which the girl laughed. When Universalia came back down with the book, the girl giggled and thanked Universalia. Universalia replied with an excited, "You're welcome." The girl introduced herself as Cardeline Redbird, and the two read the book together before Universalia and Yashia left for dinner. From that day on, Universalia and Cordelia read together whenever they were at the Firefly Library, as well as becoming best friends. At the age of 7, Universalia was enrolled in classes with Astrana Firefly to study human history. Universalia was very exhilarated about the classes, so much that she gracefully skipped, even ran to her classes for the first week. During these classes she took from an estimated 3 years, she learned about independence, the over-exaggerated version, the first settlers, Mariposa and Selena's reigns, the establishment of the kingdom, as well as the life of Queen Mariposa. These classes also brought out how intelligent Universalia was. She had very good handwriting, high reading level, was very compatible with her studies, and had a large vocabulary. This impressed Astrania and Queen Yashia, who congratulated her daughter when receiving her report scroll. A week before her classes would come to an end, it was her 10th birthday, meaning she would have to find someone to take to the Lonely Star Ball. When she was talking to Cordelia about it, Cordelia gasped and told Universalia about her brother Heron and how he would be perfect for her. Universalia agreed and would meet him at Redbird Palace with Cordelia the next morning. Upon meeting him the next morning, she was very excited. When Cordelia came down the stairs with Heron, Universalia rushed over and introduced herself. Heron shook her hand and mocked her, saying, "Good evening, little princess." Universalia immediately pulled away her hand fiercely and asked him what he had just said. He replied by saying it was a joke while holding back laughter. Universalia said okay, not knowing he was mocking her. Heron and her continued talking for a bit before Universalia returned to the castle to go to a council meeting with her mother. When the day finally arrived, Universalia dressed in her prettiest, finest gown and traveled downstairs to meet Heron. While walking to the ball, everything was all right. Universalia and Heron talked about the past few days and what they did, and while dancing, everything was fine as well. It was only at the ceremony that things escalated. While talking with Cardinella and some other young ladies, Universalia's cousin Zircon had told her that Heron was mocking her and making rude jokes about her with the other young nobles. Universalia was one to think with her fists and temper in a situation like this at the time, so she fiercely stomped over to the little group of boys Heron was in and swung at him. Thankfully she missed, yet it didn't go unnoticed by Heron, whom had mocked her, saying, "Oh my, little princess is trying to put up a fight," while laughing. Universalia, now even more infuriated, started yelling at Heron while chasing him, which scared away the other boys. Universalia grabbed the back of his shirt, turned him around, and kicked him where it hurt. The fight was broken up by the parents of both children, who pulled both children from each other. That same night, King Toloween and Queen Yushia had lectured Universalia about not to make a scene like that, as well as grounding her for 2 weeks. This pre-teen drama would start a little rivalry between Heron and Universalia for years to come. In 128, Universalia earned the wand. It had a light green ball in the middle with 2 golden lines and blue dots along the 2 tiny blue wings poking out of it. The handle was red and had light red grip, and finally at the bottom was a light blue butterfly with a pink gem in the middle. Universalia made many spells related to celestial objects, space, and the sky. 2 famous ones were Galactic Whip, which would generate a whip made out of galaxy-like matter from the wand, as well as Planet Explosion, which would erupt a blast of planets out of a specific area. One of her spells was even used by your mother, Queen Star, to save your father after she was sleep spelling. This spell is known as Lightning Twinkle Rescue. Her training with the wand would eventually lead to her discovering the Grandmother Room. Upon studying Stellaria's chapter and practicing one of her spells, Glimmering Star Bomb, she had tripped and fell down a set of stairs. Thankfully, she was not harmed by the fall, but she didn't notice the area of the castle she had landed in. She had got up to go and get her wand, which had landed a few feet away from her. After getting her wand, she had noticed a door leading into a room. Curiously, she had opened the door and entered the Grandmother Room. She approached her mother's tapestry, and the tapestry stones arose. She went from tapestry to tapestry, viewing them. The 6 tapestries she saw were Stellarias, Lunarias, Mariposas, Cosmicas, Polarias, and her mother Yushia's. This particular incident was what sparked Universalia's interest in the past queens, which led her to study them. Now wanting to study and gain knowledge of the past queens, she decided to take a course at Elfindor. It took an entire month to get ready, but in the 3rd week of Dragonette, she departed. When arriving at Elfindor, she was very excited to learn about the history of her family. She even met her professor in advance. When the classes started, Universalia, as expected, had received high grades, but a few months in, Universalia started to notice the education was extremely incoherent and incorrect. For example, she was assigned a test on the reigns of queens. Questions 12 and 15 asked how many years did Queens Lunaria and Flowicilia reign for. Universalia wrote that Lunaria 72 through 49, Flowicilia 53 through 73, which were the correct answers. Yet she failed the test, and the correct answers were Lunaria 72 through 109 and Flowicilia 55 through 87, which is completely impossible. This would mean Flowicilia would start reigning when she was 25, which she did not, and she died in 83, making it impossible for her to reign up to 87. As for Lunaria, she passed the crown to Polaria in 49, also making it impossible for her to stop reigning at 109. After 4 months, she was fed up. She had too many incorrect questions and didn't want to receive any false information. She filed a complaint to the superintendent of Elfindor and went on her way back to Butterfly Kingdom. When telling her parents why she left, she expected them to not take it lightly, but surprisingly they did. Her mother, Queen Yushia, told her that as long as she did what felt right for herself, everything was fine. Her departure from Elfindor did not mean she would stop studying, though. Instead, she took it upon herself to learn. During her daily visits, she would start to read the records, documents, history books, and even diaries of the queens. She took notes and wrote documents in her journal. Over time, the journal filled up, so she wrote another one, and another one, and another one. Over the next year, she finished studying the history and events of years B8 through 83, independence, and the reigns of Queens Mariposa through Flauicilia. In the new year of 129, Universalia started showing interest in battle and sparring. She started to watch the knights and their squires train at the battle arenas. Among some of the squires and knights was Heron, who had been training under Sir Iroquois' fields for the last year. Sometimes he would joke with his friends about Universalia. One time, Universalia heard him gossiping about her with a group of friends, to which walked over and punched Heron in the face, drawing blood and knocking out a few teeth. During the last week of Administar, Universalia was viewing the knights and squires at the arena when she noticed a purple tissue on her forehead. She pulled it off and realized what was happening. Puberty. She immediately tried running back to the castle to go to the puberty room, but tripped and fell into a ditch dug out for squire training. She couldn't escape as the ditch was 40 feet deep. After trying to climb up multiple times, she gave up, letting her puberty run its course. After 30 minutes, a purple humanoid butterfly arose from a cocoon and flew around the arena, trapping boys in webs. After her puberty, Universalia still visited the arena despite the knights and squires being in fear of the princess. But for Heron, her puberty incident was just another thing to pick on Universalia about. While studying history one day with Cordelia, the thought hit Universalia. Not many other kingdoms in Mewni knew of the Butterfly Kingdom, only the surrounding kingdoms and a few others. This thought angered Universalia because the Butterfly Kingdom had so much glory and was very powerful. This was also ironic, as the Butterfly Kingdom was the capital kingdom. Universalia then set a goal that day. She would strive to get the Butterfly Kingdom known as a powerful, glorious kingdom all across Mewni, morely in the north, where there was not very much known. During watching the training in the arena one day, at dusk when everyone finished, Universalia waited by the gate, congratulated the squires, but as usual, when Heron approached the gate, she stayed quiet. But this time something unexpected happened. When passing Universalia, he said, "Farewell, your majesty," in a polite tone, not mocking her. He even continued doing this and said things like, "Your hair looks nice," or "Your tiara looks very shiny today," even greeting her and giving her goodbyes. Universalia never responded to any of these, as she was confused and still didn't like Heron. Universalia decided to ask Cardinella why Heron was acting this way all of a sudden, and Cardinella explained everything. Apparently, Heron's girlfriend, Cassiope Firefly, had broken up with him 2 weeks prior due to him being sloppy and rude, which of course he kind of was. After mourning from the breakup, Heron decided to try and better himself as a person and be kinder to others. Universalia felt a little proud of him, as she wrote in her diary that night. Heron is now attempting to better himself as a person due to his girlfriend, Cassiopeia, ending their relationship for the sole reason of his rude personality. I respect him for making the decision, if a bit proud, but this hasn't changed my overall view of him. Yet little did Universalia know, this nicer attitude Heron was putting on would have an effect on her feelings for him. She started to feel in love around Heron and went as far as fantasizing about him, watching him train with Sir Fields. Even though she developed a crush on Heron, she wouldn't show it at all. She even got more mean around Heron so he wouldn't get the wrong idea. If he were to compliment her, she would kick and or chase him. She would even help him sometimes with wrapping bandages around his bruises or wounds, and after say things like, it's not like I like you or anything, or I only helped you because I'm nice. It's not my fault you hurt your stupid leg. This didn't cause any conflict between her and Heron, though. He still tried being nice. Universalia, who was still writing about the history and previous queens, started gaining positive feedback on the books she shipped to the North Kingdoms, requesting more books, and some started requesting alliances and trading systems to which Queen Yushia accepted. Unfortunately, though, this would only last 4 months, and requests for trading and alliances would stop. Cardinella started coming with Universalia to watch the training at the arena. When Heron came and complimented her hair, Universalia started chasing him and yelling at him as usual. When she sat back down with Cardinella, she asked what that was about. Universalia decided to tell her about her crush. Cardinella's response was squealing and jumping up and down. Universalia told her not to tell anyone, especially Heron, or she would use her galactic whip on her. Cardinella promised, being the loyal friend she was, internally excited that her best friend and brother could possibly be in a relationship. Approaching the end of the year 129, Heron, along with all the other squires training in the same arena, would receive a knighting from Queen Yushia. Universalia, Holly, Salinas, and King Talloween were required to watch. Before the knighting, while Universalia and Cardinella were getting ready, Cardinella kept pushing Universalia to tell her feelings to Heron. Universalia was stubborn, though, and said no. Later on in the night, after Heron was knighted, she caught him leaving and approached him. She asked him if she could tell him something. Heron agreed, and for a few moments there was an awkward silence, until Universalia finally confessed to him. He was in shock for a few seconds before replying. Many are still not sure what Heron said. Some say he returned the feelings, while others say he questioned why Universalia hid her feelings, but surprisingly, he actually did both. After a few weeks, Universalia and Heron decided to start a relationship, which in the beginning was very rough. Universalia kept up her stubbornness and was still hard on him, and Heron started jokingly mocking her again, being less rude though. Heron could barely kiss Universalia. He tried once, and when he was leaning in, Universalia just asked what he was doing. Universalia now had written 87 books about Mewni and history and was ready to share them, but instead of sending them to kingdoms, she sent them to Elfindor. But to her surprise, all the books returned along with a note. The note read, Universalia Butterfly, Princess of Mewni, I took your complaint into consideration and decided it would be best to end our classes on Mewni history. The education is inaccurate, and we do not wish for any of our students to fail. For this, we will not need these books. Universalia was indifferent about the whole situation, but decided to just keep the books for herself and not worry about it, and despite getting her books back, Universalia still wrote. During walking down the castle's halls one day to get more paper, Universalia went down the wrong hall. When she realized this, she started to walk back and noticed something strange about a bookshelf. It seemed like there was something behind it, and there were scratch marks on the ground. She went up to the bookshelf and observed it. It looked as if it had been moved. She moved the bookshelf back, and it revealed a staircase leading down. Universalia lighted up her wand as a source of light and walked down the staircase. When she got to the bottom, there was a gigantic room with many bookshelves and desks in the middle of it. Apparently, this was one of Hemra's secret rooms. Universalia wrote about it in a book on the topic of Hemra. Universalia decided to store all her books and recordings in here, and even studied and wrote in the room, making it her own personal library. She never told anybody, though, about this room, but since there were books, of course, I knew. Now being 1:30, Universalia and Heron's relationship started to evolve. Universalia finally let her guard down and gave Heron her soft side, being more nice to him and acting sweet to him. She even cuddled with him sometimes and had no problem kissing him. Heron also didn't make jokes that often and took her on more dates. In 131, one of the princesses of the Jade Kingdom arrived at the Mewni requesting help in fighting a battle with the kingdom, trying to conquer the land. Universalia insisted on going, saying it would give Mewni exposure for being powerful, but Yushia argued that her magic was not strong enough, and she couldn't hold her own in a battle that big. Universalia argued back that her magic was fine, and that she had no trouble fighting. After strong consideration, the queen decided to send a few battalions along with Universalia and Heron. They departed with Princess Jade 3 weeks later. The voyage took 1 month and a half. Along the way, Heron got seasickness, but thankfully it was at the care of Universalia, whom brought him soup, brought him warm towels, and cuddled with him to comfort him. All of this surprised a lot of people because Universalia was not the most caring of people, but whenever Universalia was asked about it, she just said that she did it because she loved him, just that much, and it really goes to show how much Universalia and Heron's relationship grew. When she arrived, Universalia was greeted with a warm welcome, especially because her mother had a close bond with their family. Within the first week of arriving, Universalia and Heron trained for the battle along with the other warriors. Universalia practiced magic more than ever and even perfected her butterfly form. Heron soared with the other warriors and even learned some martial arts. The Butterfly Kingdom wasn't the only kingdom helping in the battle. The Umbron, Phillips, Johansson, and Grelm Kingdom were participating too. When the day of battle came, Universalia and Heron left to battle. Before going on the field, Heron begged Universalia not to go out onto the field, but Universalia told him something that later became a famous quote. "I didn't come here to watch thousands of lives being lost as I watched from a balcony with binoculars. I'm not going to represent my kingdom as arrogant and foolish. I'm going to represent it as glorious and powerful, because that's what it is." Universalia and Heron shared one last kiss before heading into battle. Universalia went to the front of the entire butterfly army and set down the flag of the kingdom. Aside the butterfly army with the Jade army and the Umbron, Phillips, Grelm, and Johansson armies. The enemy army, or the Ling army, had just crossed the border. When they arrived at the battlefield, the Jade Kingdom immediately set a beacon into the sky declaring battle. All the armies charged, but the Ling army started firing arrows at immense speed. For every 30 seconds, they passed 700 arrows that were fired. Thankfully, Universalia casted her Blazing Sun Shield spell, which made a giant yellow shield above the armies as a source of protection. Universalia went on to slay 348 soldiers with her magic. The battle was huge, warriors on each side being stabbed, their limbs being torn off, people dying every second. While Universalia was blasting soldiers with her wand, she heard Heron scream in horrible murder. She ran over to him, and he had been stabbed by the king, Polyog. King Jade ran over and swung his sword from behind Polyog, but he ducked down and instantly turned around and stabbed King Jade through his neck, leaving him to bleed out on the ground, unable to scream. Universalia charged at King Polyog, shooting spells out of her wand. He blocked most of the blasts with his sword, but Universalia used her spell, Blazing Lunar Solar Beam, to melt through his sword. She then dipped down into her butterfly form. Her cheeks glowed as she closed her eyes and floated into the air. A blue illumination spread across the whole battlefield, and her butterfly wings shot out of her back. Just as she opened her glowing eyes, she took her wand, pointed at the king, and fired a laser made of galaxy, made through his chest, and he exploded. His limbs flew tens of feet away from where he exploded and turned into ashes. The remaining army fled out of pure fear as the armies yelled, "Victory!" The eldest daughter of King Jade took the throne 3 days after the battle. Despite the kingdom going into mourning, Universalia was congratulated for her unforgettable deed. They decided to hold a ball to celebrate the victory, and Queen Yashia and King Toloween came. When arriving back at Mewni, Universalia got on the ship. Heron ran up to her, grabbing her hand, got down on one knee, and proposed to her. Before he could even ask the question, Universalia stood up, kissed him, and punched him in the shoulder, saying, "Of course, you dummy." The wedding was held a month later in 131, with King Johansson, Umbron, Phillips, Grelm, and Queen Jade at the wedding as well, and her mother passed down the crown to her. Universalia's reign began tough. She wanted to give Mewni more power and started trading routes. Universalia first reached to the Watermelon, Sylvan, and Orange kingdoms, offering to begin trading. The kingdoms agreed, and Mewni began to receive many more fruits and produce. Soon enough, House Fields was able to produce fresh produce. from seeds given by the watermelon and orange kingdom. After establishing those two trading routes, she went on a trip to the horsewood kingdom, having a negotiation with the king about trading. After strong convincing, he agreed. Mewni then started to receive lumber, stone, bricks, and hay from the horsewood kingdom. To keep up with paying the kingdoms and harvesting resources to send to them, Universalia raised taxes. She did not make any major adjustments, but they were big. Some families couldn't keep up with the new taxes and went into poverty, but Universalia needed the money to keep up the trade. After a while of the new taxes, many people began getting very upset, especially the families who were in poverty. Many protesters would fill the streets and sometimes get violent. During Rabbit of 131, an event happened that would go down in all history books. An angry mob of protesters stormed around the front gate of the castle, throwing things at the guards of the gate and screaming violent things and swearing. The guards yelled and ordered them to leave or they would take action. A 17-year-old peasant boy cursed at one of the guards, to which he got shoved. He started a fist fight with the guard, and the guard accidentally dropped his sword straight into the boy's foot. The mob then got more violent. The guards started to get nervous and pulled out their swords and started stabbing the protesters. Thankfully, the protesters got scared away, but unfortunately, 6 people were stabbed and killed. The incident would be known as the Gate Massacre. This infuriated the protesters even more, causing them to leave the kingdom and take residence near the Mewni River. They threatened to kill the queen if she didn't lower the taxes, which angered Universalia, causing her to send knights to their village and burn it. The protesters, were now known as the Anti-Universalias, responded by setting fire to Mewni villages. The Anti-Universalias then declared war on the queen. At first, Universalia thought it was stupid, but then realized that the Anti-Universalias consisted of more than 1,900. Although this amount was very small compared to the army, somehow the Anti-Universalias had gotten a hold of some magic, so this would make battles hard. The Anti-Universalias launched their second attack when they invaded the castle. Thankfully, Universalia and Heron, along with the other royals, were evacuated so the Anti-Universalias couldn't reach them. After a battle with the army, most of their men were slaughtered, leaving only a few. The rest of the battles were not very important. They were just each side attacking the other in battles held in fields. In 132, Universalia decided to put an end to the whole debacle and sent a battalion to the village to set it on fire. The attack was successful and the village burned. The following week, the battalion was sent back to capture any survivors and bring them back. The battalion came back with 20 people, both men and women, no children. Universalia ordered them to be hung in the streets as civilians watched. The Anti-Universalia's war was with no doubt one of the shortest wars in history, as it only lasted a year. Now, with the war over, Universalia decided to write more. She also decided to dedicate 120 out of 238 books to the Firefly Library, and duplicated them with her magic so she could have copies and keep them in her secret library. Universalia started to encourage squires and knights to participate in tournaments in other kingdoms. Many teams sparked across the kingdom and started competing in tournaments across Mewni. Even her husband, Heron, competed in sparring in the Sylvan Kingdom Olympics. Competing in all these tournaments got Mewni fame and got the kingdom noticed by other kingdoms. It wasn't long before kingdoms started requesting alliances and trading. The Cactus, Leechstone, Frost, Carvel, and Clifford Kingdom formed alliances with the Butterfly Kingdom, as well as forming trading agreements. In the late summer of 132, Universalia received a visit from the king and queen Clifford, requesting the Butterfly Kingdom to help in a war with a group of monsters they were at war with. Universalia agreed, only if they helped pay for army expenses and if she reached 800,000 gold coins. The king accepted, and a month later, Universalia sent 50,000 soldiers to the Clifford Kingdom. Later in autumn, only 3,000 of the soldiers returned. Universalia then realized how powerful the monsters were, so she sent the remaining 3,000 soldiers along with 40,000 new ones, and King Heron himself went. The whole time Heron was gone, Universalia was very worried and anxious, fearing Heron might get hurt in battle and die. So she sent Sir Fields and messengers to the Clifford Kingdom. Yushia and Cardinello comforted Universalia when she was worried about Heron, telling her it would be okay. So this sometimes revealed her stress. While Universalia was eating dinner one evening, she received news that Heron, Sir Fields, and 5,000 of the soldiers were returning from the Clifford Kingdom, and that the war had won. When Heron arrived back, Universalia greeted him at the front gate and spent the entire night doing nothing but being with Heron. She even canceled a council meeting to be with him. Now that the war was over, Universalia decided to invest the money she received from King Clifford in expanding the Firefly Library and also building new ones across the kingdom. She also decided to found a ball, and what she named the Silver Bell Ball. The heirs of the Waterfolk, Ponyhead, Spiderbite Johansson, Butterfly, and later Pigeon's Own Lucitor kingdoms would all dance with each other every year, and when finished dancing with each heir would sit with their parents. At the end of the ball, Queen Butterfly would ring a silver ball, ending the ball. This ball would be made to celebrate the bond of the kingdoms. In 139, Universalia wanted to focus on producing her an heir, and this was no problem considering how intimate she and Heron were. Later that year, she gave birth to Scorpius, a girl with red hair and eyes inherited from Heron. She carried red flashes on her cheeks. Later in 143, Universalia gave birth to her second and last daughter, Virga, a girl with hair and eyes of Universalia, but with dark skin of Heron. She had pink strawberries on her cheeks. Universalia mainly focused on raising her daughters throughout the rest of the 140s, if not attending royal duties or writing in her secret library. She also joined the Magical High Commission in this time. Universalia decided to increase army pay by 80% to attract new soldiers, and it worked. By the end of the 140s, the Butterfly Army had 4 times as many recruits as before. Scorpius turned 14 in 153, and as tradition, Universalia passed the wand down to her. Sadly, in 154, Yushia passed away. Universalia was very sad, but what destroyed her even more was Universalia's father, Talloween, fell into a depression because of the death. Universalia comforted her father as much as she could. It also made Universalia realize that her father could pass at any time, making her spend more time with him. Universalia noticed her daughter Scorpius didn't come to dinner one night. She went to her room to check on her and came to Scorpius crying on her bed. When Universalia received the news that Scorpius's boyfriend cheated on her, she exploded in anger, demanding to know who the unfaithful boy was. Scorpius didn't reply and only cried. Universalia decided to take the situation upon herself and asked her sister-in-law Dove, who was a good friend to Scorpius, who the boy was. The boy was Relmic Flowers. Universalia immediately banished him from the kingdom. With this, Universalia and Heron became more protective of their daughters, prohibiting them from seeing any boys without their permission. During sleeping one night, Universalia heard the cries of her daughter Virga. Universalia and Heron rushed out of their room and saw Virga being kidnapped in the halls by a group of hooded monsters. Scorpius bulged out of her room and blasted the monsters with her wand. Heron grabbed his sword from his room and violently slaughtered the monsters. An investigation was immediately put out, and the royal residence was on high guard for the next few weeks. In a council meeting regarding the investigation a month later, Lord Flowers gave Universalia the information that the group of monsters came from a very large group of villages in the west. Universalia decided to leave it, as she didn't want to risk another war. On Scorpius' 17th birthday, Scorpius told Universalia and Heron about a relationship she was having with the boy, and she told them who it was. Universalia and Heron were upset with her for having a secret relationship, but decided to have a dinner with the next night to meet him. He proved himself worthy of Scorpius and being faithful. In 157, Universalia received the news of her brother Selenius's engagement, Princess Clifford, and was invited to a wedding party, and Universalia gladly accepted. Weeks before the wedding, Universalia reported feelings of being stalked and at night hearing footsteps outside the hall. But after a while she passed it off as being paranoid. Before leaving to the wedding, Scorpus told her and Heron how they shouldn't go. When Universalia asked why, Scorpus replied saying that the stars told me. In a graceful moment, the luminous sun will crash down on the planet and its moon, ending their time. Universalia told her it was nonsense, and they continued to go to the wedding. When she arrived at the wedding, everything was splendid. She congratulated the groom and bride and joked with Selenius. Universalia, Heron, Toloween, Selenius and his wife, Holly, and her husband, Scorpus and King and Queen Clifford all sat at a table separated from the one big one everyone else was at to eat. After the feast was done, Universalia and Heron decided to join the many other couples whom were dancing. Universalia and Heron square danced under a chandelier. They looked endearingly into each other's eyes, about to kiss, when someone screamed. The crowd cleared to reveal a group of hooded monsters with bows. The monsters immediately fired arrows at the strings holding the chandelier on the roof, and they snapped, leading to the chandelier to fall. The 30-ton chandelier fell on the Queen and King's backs and on many other people. Everyone started screaming and yelling, and a stampede formed. Scorpius tried to save her parents, but was held back by Selenius. Universalia and Heron yelled for her to run and get out, and Scorpius was eventually pulled away by Selenius out of the door. Before Scorpius left the door, she looked back at Universalia. Universalia yelled, "Take care of Mewni," as blood gushed out of her mouth before blacking out. Universalia and Heron eventually died of blood loss, and the bodies were able to be recovered 3 days later. The kingdom mourned for 2 weeks at the tragic loss of Mewni's fierce and excellent queen. Universalia, watching the knights and squires. And that was the biography of Universalia Butterfly, the Despot, by Infaminxy on DeviantArt. Please go check out the rest of their wonderful art. And whoa, that biography was quite interesting, and Universalia is a tough queen. Maybe ruthless in a little way, I think. But I hope you all enjoyed this biography. Once again, please go check out Infaminxy, and have a great rest of your day. See you all next time. Goodbye.